For more than 2 millennia, the Bronze Age shaped the ancient Near East and beyond. It was a time of glittering palaces, mighty kingdoms, and long-distance trade that stitched together cultures from India to Britain. Bronze, an alloy of copper and tin, powered this world. It armed soldiers, built tools, and filled the treasuries of kings. Cities flourished, art and writing blossomed, and diplomats exchanged letters, gifts, and royal marriages to secure alliances. Yet around 1200 BCE, this sophisticated network of empires crumbled almost simultaneously. Great cities burned, literacy waned, trade collapsed. Entire states disappeared from the map. For centuries afterward, people lived among ruins they barely understood. Modern historians call this era the Late Bronze Age collapse, and its story reads like a cautionary tale about how complex civilizations can unravel. A globalized ancient world. Picture a Babylonian king reclining at his court. He might sip Hittite wine flavored with spices from India, poured into a finely cast bronze cup made with copper from Cyprus and tin from Afghanistan. His queen could wear amber jewelry from the Baltic and silk carried overland from China. Letters, written in cuneiform on clay tablets, flew back and forth between Egyptian pharaohs and Hittite kings, arranging marriages, trading threats, or negotiating peace. Trade routes ran like arteries across this world. Merchant ships hugged Mediterranean coasts, caravans threaded through Mesopotamia and Anatolia. Diplomacy wasn't just ceremonial, it was essential to keep these lifelines open. Egypt, the first superpower. At the heart of this system stood New Kingdom Egypt. Around the 16th century BCE, the Egyptians expelled the Hyksos, foreign rulers who had dominated for nearly a century. Hard-won independence forged a professional and ambitious military elite. Pharaohs soon pushed north into Canaan and Syria, stationing garrisons and officials rather than relying on tribute alone. Wealth poured into Thebes, fueling monumental architecture, art, and temples on a scale the world had never seen. Egypt's ambitions inevitably clashed with other powers. In Anatolia, the Hittite Empire consolidated under its supreme ruler, the Great King, or Labarna. Although the Hittite state was a patchwork of semi-independent vassals, its aristocratic warriors were formidable when united. To the east, Assyria grew rich by sitting astride key trade routes and exploiting the decline of its rival, Mitanni. Meanwhile, in Babylonia, Kassite kings ruled but struggled to keep up with their aggressive northern neighbors. The battle for Syria. These great powers eyed the same prize. Syria, a commercial crossroads linking Mesopotamia, Anatolia, and the Mediterranean. When the Mitanni kingdom finally buckled under combined Egyptian, Hittite, and Assyrian pressure, direct rivalry became inevitable. The most famous clash came at the Battle of Kadesh, circa 1274 BCE. Pharaoh Rameses II and Hittite king Muwatalli II faced off in a colossal chariot battle. The Egyptians claimed victory because they held the field, but neither side achieved its goals. Exhausted, they eventually signed what is often considered the first recorded peace treaty in history. For a time, a fragile balance emerged. Egypt to the south, Hatti, the Hittite Empire, in Anatolia and northern Syria, and Assyria rising steadily in Mesopotamia. But beneath this equilibrium, cracks were forming. Greece, from Minoan splendor to Mycenaean might. Across the Aegean, a very different civilization flourished on Crete, the Minoans. They built opulent, unfortified palace complexes, worshipped a mother goddess, and mastered seafaring. Their ships dominated Mediterranean trade routes, bringing prosperity and influence. Then disaster struck. Around the 16th century BCE, the Thera eruption, modern Santorini, exploded with the force of hundreds of thousands of Hiroshima bombs. Ash darkened skies. Tsunamis up to 100 meters high smashed coastal cities. Minoan fleets were obliterated. Though they survived for a while, their dominance never returned. Into this vacuum sailed the Mycenaeans, mainland Greek warriors whose palaces were ringed with giant cyclopean walls. Fierce and fragmented, these kingdoms fought each other constantly but thrived on raiding and piracy. They borrowed Minoan art and writing, but forged a more militarized identity. These Achaeans, as Homer would later call them, became key players in the later turmoil. Internal weakness and natural disaster. By the late 13th century BCE, the great empires faced mounting internal and environmental pressures. The Hittite realm fractured under civil wars as rival princes schemed, assassinated kings, and rebellious provinces like Arzawa and Troy slipped away when no strong great king held power. Assyria, briefly expanded under King Tukulti-Ninurta I, fell into chaos after his unpopular religious reforms provoked elites and led to his assassination. Egypt stayed centralized but was strained by uprisings in Canaan, Libyan raids from the west, and Nubian threats from the south, forcing its armies to fight merely to hold borders. Meanwhile, climate change brought a long drought across the eastern Mediterranean, causing crop failures and famine from Greece to Anatolia. Even Egypt, normally a breadbasket, struggled to feed its people as Hittite kings pleaded for grain. With food scarce, the trade networks that held the Bronze Age world together collapsed. Starving regions stopped exporting and importing, merchant convoys vanished, and once busy ports grew silent. Migrations and the rise of iron. As central governments faltered, migrations erupted. Tribes from the Balkans and Danube region, including the Dorians, ancestors of classical Sparta, swept into Greece, toppling the Mycenaean palaces. Their Phrygian cousins pushed into Anatolia, joined by the Casca from the Black Sea coast, who destroyed the Hittite capital, Hattusa. One subtle but critical factor was iron weaponry. Though early iron blades were inferior to bronze in quality, iron ore was vastly more abundant and cheaper. Bronze depended on long trade networks for copper and tin, networks now collapsing. Armies of common soldiers could be armed with iron swords and spears, overwhelming the small chariot elites of Bronze Age states. War shifted from aristocratic showdowns to mass infantry clashes. Enter the Sea Peoples. Amid the chaos rose the Sea Peoples, a loose confederation of displaced groups and raiders such as the Shurten, Luca, Peliset, Philistines, and Dinai-Inan. Once mercenaries, famine drove them to piracy and migration. By the early 12th century BCE, their attacks ravaged the Levant and Egypt. A letter from Ugarit begged for help as enemy ships burned its harbors, but never sent. The city fell. Pharaoh Rameses III, RR, 1186 to 1155 BCE, met the largest assault around 1177 to 1175 BCE, trapping invaders with ships and ambushes in the Nile Delta. Egypt survived but lost Canaan and Syria. The Peliset settled on the southern Levantine coast as the Philistines, while other groups spread to Sardinia, Sicily, and Italy. Aftermath: a true Dark Age. By 1150 BCE, the Bronze Age world had collapsed into a true Dark Age. The Hittite Empire vanished, Mycenaean palaces burned and writing disappeared, and Greece fell into centuries of decline. Egypt survived but weakened, while Assyria and Babylon struggled before slowly recovering. Mediterranean trade networks shattered, leaving regions isolated. Historians see this as a systems collapse. Drought, civil wars, cheap iron, refugees, pirates, and the Sea Peoples combined to bring down interconnected states and economies. Lessons from 3,000 years ago. The Late Bronze Age. Collapse reminds us that even highly connected, technologically advanced societies are vulnerable when several stresses hit at once. Climate shocks, supply chain breakdowns, elite infighting, and waves of migration can feed each other until the system unravels. What looked like an age of unstoppable progress suddenly turned to rubble. Yet from this darkness, new worlds emerged. The Iron Age dawned, bringing cheaper weapons and tools. Small, resilient states rose: Israelite tribes in Canaan, Aramaeans in Syria, and later the mighty Neo-Assyrian Empire. In Greece, oral epics about heroes of the fallen Mycenaeans, like the Trojan War, survived to inspire Homer centuries later. The Bronze Age collapse was not the end of history, but it was a dramatic reset. For the people who lived through it, the fall of palaces and empires must have felt like the end of the world. For us, it's a reminder that complexity itself can be fragile, and that resilience depends on more than wealth and power. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the rise and fall of the Bronze Age world, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe. Got thoughts or questions about the Bronze Age collapse? Drop them in the comments. We love hearing your theories. Until next time, keep exploring the past to understand our future.